We have
No
a
affidavit.
special presentation this morning, a little bit of a departure from our citizens' grand jury. We're going to be presenting a criminal complaint against U.S. President Joe Biden to be taken up with the International Criminal Court. Good morning, Larry. How are you?
Good morning. Welcome to everyone. It's a sad day.
Now, wait a minute. We've got an echo happening there. I think we've got somebody in your office who needs to be on mute. Sorry, please continue, Larry.
It's a very sad day. What happened during and it's really too mild a word to say debacle. I would say the outrage, I don't know what word to put into it, but Joe Biden and his minions committed murder in Afghanistan. Now, he's been indicted for that. And in fact, we have a signed indictment that we will put up at freedomwatchusa.org later today. We're now arranging for a criminal trial. We are arranging for a judge. We will have a jury, a neutral jury, and we will give Biden notice, as I said last week, of the charges against him for murder and treason, negligent homicide, manslaughter, treason, and other crimes. And we will go forward with that, and we will do this quickly because we don't have any time to lose. This country is slipping away. No one's being held accountable for anything. Just this week, you turn on the TV and you watch congressional hearings, a dog and pony show with his military advisors, so to speak, Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley, Department of Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and others just lying through their teeth, protecting themselves, but they did implicate Biden, in effect, in doing so. And then, of course, you have the lies coming out of Jen Psaki in the White House, a continuous series of lies. Just as an aside, I might add, in the European Union, for instance, and European governments, they would never allow the press secretary to get up and lie on behalf of the head of state. That's not to say that they're better than we are, but they're smarter than we are. And the American people are beginning to understand that what comes out of the mouth of a press secretary means nothing because it's not really with the endorsement of the president. Anytime he or she gets caught lying, they can just say, oh, I made a mistake. We want to hear from the commander in chief. We want to hear from the president. And this is an issue for another time. It's an issue for our Third Continental Congress. But we need accountability at the top. And that's what we are doing right now, not just with regard to the indictment of our citizens' grand jury against Joe Biden for negligent homicide, manslaughter, treason, and other related crimes. Not just with regard to our prior indictment, with regard to accepting bribes from China, Communist China, Ukraine, and Russia. And he's going to be tried all at the same time with all of these charges, not just with regard to indictment of Robert Mueller last year and Anthony Fauci earlier this year. But we need to have international accountability too. And this is what we're talking about right now, is that Freedom Watch has prepared a complaint, and we are going to file it later today at the International Criminal Court against so-called President Joe Biden. And I say so-called because it's really the election has not finally been confirmed yet through a variety of audits and other means throughout this country, regardless of what these hack federal judges say that scratch the back of the establishment. But crimes against humanity, and this is a very powerful mechanism. It's not just against Joe Biden. It's against Mark Milley, Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. It's against Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, and others, that are involved in this. They ordered a drone strike, and it came from the top. It came from Biden himself, just like Obama used to do. Remember, Biden was Obama's vice president. You can't kill someone without due process of law, without having a presidential order that allows that to happen. And of course, that doesn't make it legal. So throughout this complaint, we point out the circumstances upon which Biden and his minions, these other defendants, ordered a drone strike, basically for public relations purposes. Because as you might remember, 13 American servicemen, brave servicemen, heroes died just days before. Hundreds of Afghans. This was to be able to deflect and to say, okay, we retaliated against Al-Qaeda, against ISIS, and the Taliban. Of course, they're all one and the same. The Muslim Brothers are one and the same, just like Rashida Tlaib and Ilham Omar are one and the same in the U.S. Congress. Blood is thicker than anything else, and I don't care who did it. but you don't go off and you kill innocent civilians and 7 children. That's a crime against humanity. And he knew or had reason to know, because of inadequate intelligence, that what he was doing was for public relations purposes. So Biden and the other defendants could claim they were tough guys. They retaliated. And then they covered it up. And it wasn't until press reports came out in the Washington Post and elsewhere that we found out that innocent civilians and children were killed. Now, the United States is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court. We did not sign it because we did not want to give them jurisdiction over, our representatives and other governmental officials, or the military for that matter. But the International Criminal Court does have jurisdiction with regard to countries who signed it. And they can exercise that jurisdiction against countries that don't sign it. So in this particular instance, it's a very, very powerful weapon, so to speak, to use against Biden and against Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of Defense Austin, and others that are included in this complaint. It was used years ago with regard to General Augusto Pinochet of Chile. And he was also indicted in Spain, which has a similar law, worldwide jurisdiction for crimes against humanity. Pinochet was tried, he was convicted, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Fortunately for him, I'm saying that somewhat facetiously, he died before that happened. Years ago, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld were also subject to a complaint like this. Now, the United States put a lot of pressure on, and ultimately it was withdrawn. This occurred in Brussels, Belgium, which has a similar law, worldwide jurisdiction for crimes against humanity. The United States, under Bush, threatened Belgium with removing NATO from Brussels if they didn't retract the law. But during the time that this complaint was active, neither Bush nor Cheney nor Rumsfeld ever traveled to Europe. They would have been arrested. So consequently, if this gathers some traction at the International Criminal Court, it will probably curtail the foreign travels of Joe Biden and these military so-called leaders, because they can be arrested. Now, they need to be held accountable. There's no excuse for this. In addition to killing, all of these civilians and 7 children, they are responsible for the deaths of 13 American servicemen, our heroes, other Americans, and hundreds of Afghans that occurred in the wake of our surrender to the Taliban. And we will use whatever means we can, peacefully and legally, to hold Biden accountable. It's as simple as this. The man is a criminal. He makes the Clintons look like Mother Teresa. He did what the Clintons did, taking millions of dollars of bribes from communist China, Ukraine, and Russia, and then he one-upped it. He killed American servicemen. He killed children. Now, notwithstanding the fact that many people believe, including yours truly, that the Clintons were responsible for the deaths of many during their administration, particularly material witnesses, perhaps even Jeffrey Epstein, they all need to be held accountable. And consequently, that is the purpose for this complaint at the International Criminal Court. And it is complementary to the indictment which we are bringing before our citizens' grand juries, where Biden and his son and his brother James will be tried for the bribery, and Biden will be tried for the crimes that he committed in Afghanistan, the negligent homicide, the murder, the treason, etc., in a U.S. people's court with a people's judge, with a people's jury. And we will seek a conviction. We will ask for a life sentence, and we will ask law enforcement and the military to carry it out peacefully and legally. This is the least that we can do as American citizens. Because right now, as you know, and I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org, I want you to read my book. Didn't write it for profit. I wrote it because I needed to tell the American people just how corrupt our established legal system is. As Jefferson said, judges, federal judges, unelected, life tenured, they believe, unaccountable to the people, as Jefferson predicted, have turned into despots and tyrants. And Jefferson said this would cause the people to rise up and shed the blood of patriots and tyrants again, yet every 20 years. He added, what's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? Now, he didn't want to see anybody dead or hurt. Neither do I, neither do you. We want to do this peacefully. But if we don't succeed in taking back our legal system and holding the guilty accountable, because our politically compromised and corrupt federal judiciary will not hold the establishment accountable. Why? Because they got on the bench thanks to that establishment and the lobbyists and special interests, labor unions, corporations, big law firms, etc., that basically bribed politicians to recommend them for the bench. Their names get put in front of the president. The president doesn't know who he's appointing, rubber stamp, and there you have these people on the bench. And as you'll see in my book, I've been in front of about 10 Trump-appointed judges so far. Either they lack courage or are dishonest or are corrupt. And I detail it. And I'm updating the book right now. Don't stop you from getting the other book, because this one, is important as well, and it's out right now. The other one won't be out for several months. But you have to see that the people that we have on our federal bench are incapable of administering to a legal system which is now being run by the Biden-Harris regime, where the Justice Department and the FBI are being used as their own private Gestapo on behalf of the left to quell any dissent, and where the federal judges are rubber stamping that, where they're throwing peaceful protesters in prison, waiting trial, many in solitary confinement. Some are even being imprisoned because they looked on social media to see what Mike Lindell was doing these days. And one judge even said Thomas Hogan, a Reagan appointee, believe it or not, said he was considering upping the sentence to a peaceful protester because he was watching the internet, and watching conservatives on the internet. This is what you're dealing with today. Our legal system is corrupt top to bottom. We are no better than any other country in the civilized world, and I use the word civilized loosely. And that is why we need to take our legal system back, put it into our own hands, citizens' grand juries, complaints at the International Criminal Court, wherever else we can get justice. And we also have one pending, Freedom Watch, against the communist Chinese at the International Criminal Court over COVID-19. Now, this one is more likely to be instituted than that, because the Chinese basically, as they did with Joe Biden, have bribed everybody. But it's still important that we try. And also, whether we succeed or not, we need to show the American people that we tried. We tried to use a legal system by and for the people. Whether we can carry out the sentences will depend on law enforcement and the military. I believe the military's had it. The rank and file military have been betrayed. They've been maimed. They've been assaulted. They've been killed. They've been disrespected by this president. I believe it will happily carry it out. Just a few months ago, 140 retired generals and admirals sent a letter to Joe Biden telling him to shape up or ship out. I don't advocate a coup d'etat, but if Biden sees that his time is over, if he wants to avoid, like Richard Nixon did, a real internal crisis in this country, if he has one shred of patriotism, which frankly I doubt at this point in time, even if he had it, he's too brain dead to know whether he has it or not, but he will leave. He needs to leave. Kamala Harris needs to leave, the cackling witch that doesn't know what's going on because she doesn't care to know what's going on, or is so stupid she can't figure it out. And then you've got Nancy Pelosi over there in the House. I call them the Three Stooges, who's had more facelifts than Joan Rivers at this point. And she smiles too strongly. Her face will probably crack. I can't deal with these people, and you can't either. So we have to rise up. If you want to save this country, if you care about your children and grandchildren and future generations, get out of retirement, get up off the couch and do something. And if you're a younger American, realize that you're going to be living in a communist, atheist hellhole if you don't play a role as well. So that's the reason for these complaints, because without a legal system that functions, you cannot keep the country together. It will fracture, and you see it happening right now on Capitol Hill with regard to so-called infrastructure bills. It'll wind up into an internal civil war between the radicals of the left, radical Muslims, radical blacks, radical members of the Marxian Jewish left, radicals, gays, lesbians, transgenders, radicals of every stripe, including atheists. And most of the people in these groups are decent people. They want to be left alone. And I say, tell the radicals in your groups to leave us alone, because we have a country, and this country is based on a long history of sacrifice and good intentions. Sometimes, we messed up a little bit, but we are the greatest country on earth. We don't need a new flag. We don't need two national anthems, even if it's with the NFL, who are basically comprised of a bunch of morons. I don't even watch them anymore. I don't care to watch morons on TV. But we need to hang together, because as Benjamin Franklin said, either we all hang together or separately we will hang. If you don't like this country, go somewhere else. Get out. This is our country. And our country is going to enforce the rule of law. And that's what this is all about. And the people now are going to have to rise up and do it. Because as it says in our Declaration of Independence, when in the course of human events, the sovereign, the rulers, no longer represent the people, under the laws of nature and nature's God, it doesn't say the king's laws, it doesn't say the laws of the existing government, under the laws of nature and nature's God, that we the people have a right to alter or abolish that government and to form a new government with equal rights for everyone in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And we're doing that with our Third Continental Congress as well. I am recommending that we declare independence. We're going to be setting up an alternative government peacefully and legally, nominating a president, nominating a minister of justice. Now, I'm not going to use the same names that we currently use. It's the same country, but it's a new government. These are my proposals. It's for you to decide whether to adopt them or not. We're going to have a full slate of candidates that can be voted upon who will lead our country successfully into the future, because our current government is run by an evil Democratic Party, literally inhabited by the devil, and a corrupt Republican Party that's more interested in raising money. How many emails do you get every day asking for money that do little to nothing, haven't modified or abolished Obamacare, which is so outrageous that if you decide you want to change your sex, you can actually have the government pay for it. That's just one example at our expense. And haven't balanced the budget. It's now going to be worse than before. We're bankrupted. This country's going down the drain, economically, health-wise, in terms of crime in the streets and everything you can name. Today, I'm wearing a hat, americassheriff.org, which is a group I found, a separate group with Sheriff Joe Arpaio to protect the police, because you can't even sit in a cafe anymore without thinking that someone may come up behind you and stab you in the back or blow your head off. That's where it is today, particularly in major cities. This is the state of the nation. Without the rule of law and without law enforcement, this country will disintegrate. It's already 90% gone. A man is no longer a man. A woman's no longer a woman. American flag, no, that means nothing. Even Bill Maher, who is against a black flag with regard to the NFL, says, okay, a black national anthem. He says, okay, we can have another national anthem. That's a bone to the left. Okay, these people have no sense of right and wrong. But I have a sense of right and wrong, and so do you. And we will rise up. And final thought, Jason, then I want to get your thoughts. You want to know why this country is going through what it's going through? Let me give you my opinion. God many times in world history has destroyed civilizations when they no longer adhere to his word, whether it's the word contained in the Old Testament or the New Testament or the Talmud or any place else. When you kill hundreds of millions of unborn children, of babies, when you disrespect the difference between a man and a woman, which is contained in the Bible, in our scriptures, in our history, in the way we are, when you trash people who tried to follow the word of God and instead insert the word of the devil, the God that we know, the Judeo-Christian God, is going to react. And he's done that many times in history. And I personally believe, you may not agree with me, that what we are going through today is the wrath of God, and he's giving us a test, just like the military that sent the letter to Biden, but in a much bigger way. Either you, the American people, shape up, or I'm going to ship you out. So you think about that carefully. And that's why in the old book of Isaiah, God prophesizing the coming of the Messiah, of Jesus Christ. I'm a Messianic Jew. And whether you're Jewish through and through, or you're Messianic like me, I consider myself Jewish through and through, but I also happen to believe in Jesus. God said, this is the Old Testament, book of Isaiah, that he could only restore the tarnished city to the faithful city through the counselors and judges, meaning lawyers and judges. When we don't have a legal system that can carry out his word, his edicts, we will perish. That's all I have to say for today, Jason. We're going to get up on our website the complaint to the International Criminal Court that we're filing later today, and also the indictment that came down with regard to Joe Biden by our citizens' grand juries for Afghanistan and also for the bribery. And we will proceed with a trial. And we ask the American people to support us with this. It's going to be a very expensive endeavor, but we must do it on our own because we must try to save this country, which is already 90% on its back, gasping for air, ready to expire peacefully and legally.
Yeah, Larry, I want to remind people that they can support Freedom Watch and the effort to bring this criminal complaint and continue the citizens' grand juries by going to freedomwatchusa.org and tapping on the donate button. People who make a tax-deductible contribution of $50 or higher are going to get a gift copy of Larry's book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. So this is a great way to support the effort and get Larry's excellent book. Now, Larry, with regard to the International Criminal Court, I know the headquarters is in The Hague, but they have something near the UN here in New York City. How do you see the rest of this process unfolding in the most favorable possible outcome, given what we hope to achieve?
Well, the center of power is in The Hague, Holland. When I was a young lawyer, actually, I studied at the Hague International Academy, the Hague International Academy of Law in The Hague, Holland. That's where the center is. Okay. So the decisions will be coming out of that. They, of course, have correspondent offices in New York. It is technically part of the United Nations. But like I said, Jason, although I'm not a big fan of the United Nations, hardly, we will use whatever means we can to bring Joe Biden to justice. These people have no love lost for Joe Biden at this point in time. He double-crossed them, particularly the Europeans. People know that he's a threat to their national security. And the fact that he killed 7 children speaks for itself. As we say in the law, res ipsa loquitur, the fact speaks for itself. You don't kill 7 children and walk away scot-free.
Right. And the complaint that you and your team at Freedom Watch have put together, it raises a number of interesting points that I actually haven't seen elsewhere in the news. Obviously, Joe Biden and his supporters, Jen Psaki, et cetera, have tried to make hay out of their perception that they were somehow saddled with some kind of plan from Donald Trump that was inadequate. But as you clearly lay out in the complaint, this is essentially an admission of their own failing, because if they knew the plan were inadequate, why would they proceed with executing it rather than formulating a new plan that they felt was adequate? We've seen plenty of examples of them canceling Donald Trump's plans in other areas.
You take a time out and you say, okay, we need to retool and we need to figure this thing out. And it was clear this week with the testimony of these generals. Of course, you can't believe them either, but to the extent that they were even partially true, they gave advice to Joe Biden not to do what he did. But he did it anyway because he wanted to have, for public relations purposes, to boost his standing, to boost the standing of his party, as he's trying to ram through this socialist communist legislation, which is going to bankrupt us further. He wanted to say, we left Afghanistan by September 11th, the 20th anniversary of September 11, 2001. That's what it was about. It was all political. And when he killed those people with a drone strike, the civilians, that was political. It was to try to bail his, excuse the French, ass out from what he had just allowed to happen with regard to the death of 13 American servicemen and others. That's what it was about. And that's what it's been about with a number of presidents, but never to the extent that you've seen it so clearly here, is that they have sacrificed the American hero, our fighting men and women, for political purposes, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was Korea, whether it was, other wars that we never finished. We never finished the Korean War. MacArthur wanted to get it over with. We're still dealing with that, with 60,000 troops there or 50,000 troops. And that's another thing. Why did you have to take every troop out of Afghanistan? Why was that any different than leaving troops in Korea or in Japan or in Europe? Why did you have to take it out? Why did you have to be Mr. Big Shot and say, okay, I've done this prior to September 11th. This is, the state we find ourselves in today. American servicemen and women and Americans being sacrificed for political purposes. And how would you feel if your son or daughter died in Afghanistan, Iraq, or one of these wars, or was maimed, lost a leg, was blind, or whatever? What would you be feeling today? Which is why I'm convinced that the military will enforce our convictions of Joe Biden.
Larry, there's another important point that, you're posing these questions obviously very diplomatically. I think you and I agree that these weren't oversights necessarily. The New York Times reported in 2010 that the United States had identified vast mineral deposits in Afghanistan, most notably lithium. And for the past 20 years, we have seen the fruits of the military-industrial complex in its efforts to corner the market on the premium resource, the master resource, energy. And historically, that has been brought to us through control of oil. But as the world shifts to electronic devices, including automobiles that are powered by batteries, control over lithium is going to be the next major source of energy. The New York Times even referring to Afghanistan as the Saudi Arabia of lithium. And students of history will recall that prior to the 1930s, Saudi Arabia was basically as desolate as Afghanistan is right now, whereas today, because of the discovery of oil and the interest of the United States, the United Kingdom, and other developed nations, it's one of the wealthiest, most powerful, and influential countries on earth. Joe Biden has essentially put the Taliban in charge of this future resource, equipped them and armed them with resources far better than they had in 2001, and created a situation that is perhaps not yet fully understood in terms of the danger to the imbalance it introduces to the global geopolitical scale.
Very well put, Jason. And of course, the Chinese, that's why they're moving in, why the Iranians are moving in, why the North Koreans are moving in, and why others of our adversaries, Russia, moving in, because they want access to that resource. We've blown it again. Many people thought when I ran Judicial Watch, we uncovered documentation showing that the Cheney Energy Task Force under George W. Bush was dividing up the oil fields in Iraq. This was before the Iraq War commenced after 9/11. In control of those oil fields at the time were European oil companies like, BP and others. We wanted those oil fields. So we went in, we fought a war. And as Trump said correctly, we were too stupid and we never even got access to the oil. Why did the American taxpayer have to pay for that war, however misguided it was? Why wasn't it paid for with oil that was pumped out of the ground in Iraq when we, quote, liberated the Iraqis? So our foreign policy has been a disaster only by virtue of the fact that the United States is so wealthy. And we've been lucky so far. Are we even, on this earth at this time? Well, at the same time, our military, has been neglected. Our nuclear missiles, in silos in North Dakota and South Dakota and elsewhere, are sitting there in pools of water. No one even knows if they work. They haven't been upgraded. Russia and China have much more advanced nuclear weapons than we do at this point in time. And Joe Biden, is spending money on, excuse the French again, bullshit, trillions and trillions of dollars and neglecting our defense. And of course, Afghanistan is just one area. No one said we had to stay in Afghanistan forever, but no one said we had to turn it over like this.
Absolutely. And, it's recently reported all over that North Korea has claimed to be testing hypersonic missiles, which would also have a major impact on global strategy in terms of nuclear war. And, Larry, you mentioned Donald Trump's statements regarding oil. And although our current president, Joe Biden, makes Donald Trump look like an Ivy League scholar and a military genius on every level, I think we agree that President Trump sometimes put things indelicately and could even be accused of being crass at times. I know that peaceful Americans don't want our country traveling around the world destroying other countries to steal their resources. But of course, once we were engaged in Afghanistan, the problem existed, and we can't go back and change time. I've had several conversations with a woman who was trapped in her home in Afghanistan who revealed to me that she felt far safer with the U.S. military in place. And this presents the possibility that had the U.S. left a military force there just to oversee stability in the region and prevent the Taliban from rising up, it wouldn't necessarily be a matter of stealing the resources, but rather bringing the technology to Afghanistan to allow them to become a modern industrial nation that can sustain its population with its own natural resources. And the United States could have shared in that profitability and enabled Afghanistan to become a healthy member of the international economic community, rather than quite clearly laying it all at the feet of our greatest economic and rising military adversary in China, who not only is moving in, but seems to have quite clearly had designs on it from the beginning.
Well, that's right. The Chinese are very smart. They're not stupid people. They moved into the Panama Canal. They control that today. Major utilities and resources throughout the world. They even have bought up half of Israel, which explains why, in our case in Israel, the judges are allowing the Ministry of Justice in Israel to come in and actually defend the Chinese. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I love Israel, but there's corruption there too. So this is, what you're dealing with today. Granted, Afghanistan is an uncivilized place. They don't know the concept of democracy. Their presidents flee with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, mostly comprised of aid the U.S. taxpayer provided. But to turn it over the way we turned it over, without even a minimal military presence to try to give the Afghan army a chance to hold the Taliban at bay, at least long enough to set things up properly, or negotiate a peace, if that would be possible. This was all done for political purposes. So Joe Biden must pay. This guy, I can tell you, I'm now 70 years old. To say he's the worst president in my lifetime is really an understatement. I mean, this guy's a danger to every American in this country. He's an absolute disgrace. He's dishonest to the core. He's a criminal. I mean, he's so criminally minded, he makes the Clintons look good. I mean, and I mean that, with tongue in cheek, of course. So this is where we are today. We have to peacefully and legally get rid of him, get rid of Kamala Harris, and get rid of Nancy Pelosi. And by the way, as far as the two political parties, we need to get rid of them too. We need political parties that represent the American people.
Yeah. And, Larry, I think we should also mention that this is all happening simultaneous with mainstream news and mainstream social media sites clamping down in a totalitarian, technocratic way that we have never seen before outside of the Soviet Union or communist China. YouTube yesterday announced that it would ban all information that it feels is incorrect. And basically, this is anything that they determine is not acceptable information. They've literally become an Orwellian ministry of truth. Simultaneously, YouTube has blocked throughout the country of Germany RT from broadcasting on YouTube. And in response, just yesterday, Russia has threatened to block all of YouTube in its country. So we really see how these social media giants, which just a few years ago seemed like comical toys played with only by children, have become players in the international political stage.
I've talked about this on my radio show on Radio America, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, which is on the weekend. You can catch that at freedomwatchusa.org. It's heard about 50 stations throughout the country. And also my podcast each morning, which you can also get at freedomwatchusa.org. But here's how bad it's become. Here's how far down the chain it's gone. Is that a week ago, there was a golf tournament called the Ryder Cup, where the United States, in theory, challenges Europe. Europe challenges the United States with golfers from both of our continents. And I said, I posted a thing on a golf blog just for fun. I wanted to see the reaction. I said, the Ryder Cup is a sham. I mean, it's a great tournament if you watch it because they're great golfers. But it's a sham because the European golfers, by and large, are actually Americans, right? Most of them live in Jupiter, Florida. Florida, you don't pay income tax, personal income tax. And many of them come from South Africa. They don't want to live in South Africa anymore for obvious reasons. There's the best golfer in the world right now. Number one is John Rahm. He went to the University, Arizona State, played on the golf team as nearly all these European golfers did in the United States. He married an American. He has an American kid. And in all likelihood, he's an American citizen, at least an American resident. So I said, you know what? The United States wins either way, because the European team is really the American team as well. And you know what? I got a warning on this golf blog site. It says, if you post anything like this again, we'll cut you off. I mean, you know, how innocuous can you be? You know, and I was tongue in cheek. You know, I was kind of trying to be funny. But
well, it's amazing,
this is where
Larry.
it's on.
Well, and it is. We're living, I've said it many times, we're in a post-constitutional America, and really the freedom of speech is one of the most valued rights that we each possess. Even young children are aware of this right, but it is no longer the case. People can still watch simulcasts of our broadcasts on the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. People can also subscribe for free on YouTube, and it's a great time to get on there. You can catch simulcasts of the citizens' grand juries, as well as Larry's podcasts, his daily video updates, and other videos that we've done together. I also want to let people know, Larry, if they are objecting to YouTube, as many people around the world are, they can also watch simulcasts on rumble.com/user/CS-the-truth. Rumble is a great alternative to YouTube for live streaming that currently does not apply the same restraints to freedom of speech that Google and YouTube have. And people can also see simulcasts on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. So there's a lot of ways to catch the broadcasts, Larry, but I do want to remind our viewers that the efforts that you and your team at Freedom Watch undertake are not free and not easy, and they can't happen without the support of our viewer sponsors. So I hope that people will visit freedomwatchusa.org and tap on the donate button. As I said earlier, tax-deductible contributions of $50 or more will also get you a copy of Larry's book, and it's an excellent way to support the effort. People can also support this channel by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And Larry, I want to thank you for helping us understand what the International Criminal Court can do to hopefully help citizens of the United States overcome this truly criminal presidency that we're being subjected to right now. Anything else you want to cover before we wrap it up today, Larry?
I wanted to add with regard to YouTube is that President Trump filed a complaint against YouTube in the Southern District of Florida, my home state, a few months ago. We filed one as well for Freedom Watch, and we're there in front of the same judge. We'll be sitting at the same table with his lawyers fighting YouTube. But we don't roll over. We don't go for what YouTube is doing with regard to people, nor any of these social media sites. And I also want to point out one other thing. I want people to be discerning about this. The biggest threat we face in this country is the lack of ethics and morality, the so-called internal rot from within. Like I said, where man is no longer a man, a woman is no longer a woman, where gay marriage is accepted. I mean, if you want to be gay, that's fine, in my opinion, but certainly that's not sanctioned by God. And, you know, I can go on and on and on, but it's also the rot in the conservative movement, I might add. There's many people out there, I want you to be discerning, that are just profiteering right now, that, you know, are making suggestions. You probably get the emails too, the political consultants in and around President Trump. You may even not know about this in any great detail, suggesting that he's going to run again for president. And because they're raising money. The money goes to the political consultants primarily. And it's not honest, because sadly, and we will fight against this, but the minute Trump might even think of announcing for president, these rabid leftist prosecutors in New York City and elsewhere will indict him and many in his family. And that'll tie him down. He'll spend the next few years just trying to keep himself out of prison. Can you imagine President Trump being tried in front of a New York jury, or a California jury, or a District of Columbia, which is even worse, which, you know, where the people vote, government workers, almost 99% Democrat. So I want American people to understand that they have no political messiah. that President Trump, as much as you might like him to, or I might like him to, he's not coming back. That we have to do it for ourselves. We're on our own right now. And do not hang back and think that a political messiah is going to come along and save you. No more than our founding fathers believed that either. They reached a point where they could no longer compromise with King George III. King George III was a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout compared to Biden, Harris, and Pelosi. King George III was not a socialist. He was not a communist. He was not an atheist. He was not a radical Muslim. He wasn't a Marxian of the radical Jewish left. He wasn't a radical gay, lesbian, or transgender or transsexual. And he was not an atheist. He simply wanted to overtax us to pay for the rest of his empire. And when we complained, then he tried to take away our guns. And then he took away our legal system. And that was it. And hostilities broke out at Lexington and Concord before July 4th, 1776. We were already at war at that point. Today, we're in much worse shape than we were then. So I want people to be careful as to who they support, thinking that those people, even if they claim to be conservatives, and certainly not Republicans, the Republicans, in my view, don't represent the American people anymore. They represent themselves. They want to amass more money and more power, and that's about it. But I want you to be discerning about that because it's scamming the American people. And even if it wasn't scamming the American people, we need to do it for ourselves. And that's what we're trying to do at Freedom Watch. And that's what I hope you'll join our cause. And I hope that you'll support the citizens' grand juries and cases like this International Criminal Court complaint that we're bringing today and others. And I say we do it peacefully and legally, because if we don't succeed, there are those in this country that will do it another way. And we don't want to see that. So that's my final word. Case closed.
Thanks. Excellent. Well said, Larry. Thank you very much. And the one last thing I want to remind our audience about, I've created a Citizens Grand Jury co-host channel. This channel is controlled by me, and a great way for people to stay on top of not only the Citizens Grand Jury broadcasts, but to go back and see all of Larry's appearances on Crowdsource the Truth, as well as the original broadcasts of the Third Continental Congress, which was recorded live in Philadelphia on July 5th and 6th. We've also broken out several of the speakers into shorter clips. So if you missed the Third Continental Congress, make sure you visit the Citizens Grand Jury YouTube channel. You can subscribe for free and stay current on all the Crowdsource the Truth broadcasts that involve Larry Klayman and Freedom Watch. I want to thank everybody for watching today, and I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great night, and thanks for watching.
Thanks, Jason. You're very, very important to the American people. Appreciate it.